Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Steve Taylor, the author of several best-selling books, most recently The Leap, The Psychology of Spiritual Awakening. He's also written a number of other books on psychology and spirituality and is the senior lecturer in psychology at Leeds Beckett University. And for the last 5 years, he has been included in the Mind, Body, Spirit magazine list of the 100 most spiritually influential living people. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hi, great to be here.
All right. And Steve, let's dive right in with a favorite success quote or a saying that's helped you on your journey and share with us why you chose that.
Okay, this is it's actually from a poem of mine. I write poetry too. It's from a book of mine called The Calm Center. And the poem is called The End of Success. And it's about how we often strive for success as if it's a future goal, when often it's enough to be aware of where we are right now and to be aware of the present state of our lives. And we can often find enough fulfillment in the present. So the quote goes, "Finally, it's clear that fulfillment isn't a place to seek, but the place from which you're seeking. And that wholeness isn't a distant future goal, but your closest present state. And no matter how much success you accumulate or how much failure trails behind you, it's always enough just to be alive."
Wow. I think a much needed poem and our quote here in today's society where, there is this message that, success is over there. It's on the other side. And what I'm getting from your poem here is that there's a lot right here in front of us if we open our eyes and see it.
Yeah, that's right. Often we become so fixated on our goals or our ambitions for the future that we forget to look at what we have already. And often it becomes a cycle, a vicious cycle where we want to achieve more and more, and we become less and less satisfied with what we have. So sometimes, we need to sort of step off the train and just look around, get off at the station and look around at what's around us right now.
What do you think happens to a man when he is constantly chasing success and not taking the time to be present and to enjoy today?
Well, we can lose our lives because if you consider it, the present is really the only thing we have. Even when we chase after our future goals, we're chasing in the present. And even when we consider our pasts, we consider them in the present. So we're always in the present. And it's fine to, we do need goals. We need paths to move towards into the future. But we're always in the present, and unless we look around and take in the reality of where we are right now, and unless we focus on our experience right now in the present, then in a sense we do lose our lives.
Wow. And will it just stay that way? Like for someone who is constantly chasing this success and not enjoying, taking a step back and enjoying where he is now, how far he's come, being grateful, being present now. Will it stay that way, or how does the man wake up? How does the man snap out of that? What is the man to do here?
Well, yeah, we need to realign ourselves and recenter ourselves. And often we kind of lose ourselves by becoming so fixated on the future. And we kind of become a bit sort of decentered, as I said before. And we lose a kind of a grounding within ourselves. And that's why often when we try too hard to achieve our goals, we feel stressed and we lose our energy, and we put so much effort into achievement that we come away from ourselves. So first of all, we need to recenter ourselves, just like parking in at a lay-by, getting out of the car, and just gazing around you and gazing at the panorama around you. And you need to take some time out to recenter yourself and just to bring your attention into your experience, into the daily experiences of everyday life, just relaxing, looking around, taking the time to be aware of what you're eating, what you're actually doing as you move around your house or the streets, paying attention to your surroundings, to the objects around you. And after a while, when you've done that, once you've begun to recenter yourself, you feel a sense that you're coming back home, that you're returning to yourself. It's as if you've lost your groundings, and suddenly now you can feel the stable ground beginning to form beneath you again. So you feel a sense of that you're really relaxing, you're becoming attuned to yourself. And once you've done that, then you can begin to look into the future again. And you can reevaluate your life and reevaluate your goals. And you can, in a sense, you can begin anew.
What would happen to our relationships if we didn't take the time to be present, if we didn't take the time to live in the now?
Well, it has quite a negative effect on our relationships, because I think one of the biggest problems in relationships is a lack of presence. Because, often when we've been together with somebody, a partner or a wife or husband for a long time, and even, with members of our families who we've known for a long time, they become familiar to us and we start to take them for granted. And then we start to, think about other things when we're talking to them. We don't put the time into the relationship because we're so focused on our own desires or needs. And when that happens, the other person senses that they're becoming devalued, that we're not respecting them by giving them attention in the present. So that leads to resentment and a lack of trust. And it causes a lot of discord in the relationship. It gives rise to arguments and a lot of disagreements, a lot of turmoil. So again, it's due to a lack of presence. So when you're, in your relationships, you need to be focused on the person you're with. You need to give them your whole attention in the present moment. And that makes them feel valued, and it creates harmony in relationships. Discord begins to fade away. The person senses that they're being respected, and they give the respect back to you. So relationships become a lot more harmonious.
And so what do you do, or what would you recommend for someone to do who's really struggling with staying present? So they find their mind drifting, racing thoughts, thinking about the past, or very anxious about the future. What would you advise them to do? Is there like a saying? Is there a breathing, some sort of exercise that you would recommend us to do?
Yeah, well, one thing you can do is you always have the opportunity to bring your attention back into the present. But there are some activities which lend themselves to being present. So this morning, for example, I went for a swim. And sometimes when my mind becomes a bit too busy and I feel as though I need to settle down a bit and return to the present, I go for a swim and I just stop thinking and I give my attention to the sensations of my arms and legs moving through the water. I just really feel the movement of my arms and legs in the water and my body moving through the water. And I close my eyes so I can feel the motion very intensely. And then maybe I open my eyes again. When I sense that I've become a bit quiet inside, I open my eyes again, look around. But basically, it always helps to give attention to the body rather than the mind. So often when we become, elsewhere, when we are no longer present, it's because we've become preoccupied with thoughts and desires or aims or ambitions or memories about the past. So whenever that happens, we need to give our attention to the body so that our attention moves away from the mind. So things like swimming is really helpful. Running is really helpful. Any kind of full body exercise where you can really give your attention to the body. And nature is also helpful too. If you can get into a park or into the countryside, and again, when you're in the countryside or the park, just make a gentle, conscious effort to give your attention to your surroundings, to the hills around you, the trees, the sky, the clouds, and the sun. And when you do that, you'll find that your mind is becoming quieter, and you can sense that you're becoming more present. And as a result, a sense of ease and a sense of peace begins to fill you.
I mean, even just listening to the tone of your voice, I feel very present. You're just talking about all this. This is great. Now,
Good.
So if we think about when someone is born, do they already have this? Are they already present beings? And then is it through life and society and challenges and maybe even just life in general? Is that what takes away our presence? Like, I'm thinking, like, is it the chicken or the egg here? Did we always have it and then we lost it? Or is it something that we all have to remember to put ourselves back into that state?
It's a bit of both, I think. I mean, I think children, especially young children, are very present. In some ways, children, they have some of the characteristics of enlightened people or, and awakened beings because they have this amazing capacity to be present. And children don't care about the future. The past doesn't mean anything to them. The future doesn't mean anything to them. So whatever they're doing, whether they're playing or talking to their friends or wandering around, they give 100% of their attention to their present experience. And as a result, the world is really fascinating to them. Everything is very vivid, very alive, very beautiful. And I realized this when I had children myself, or, when my wife and I had children. And I'd go for walks with my 3-year-old boy, and it'd take us ages to get anywhere because he'd stop all the time to pick up things, to touch leaves, to wander around, to look at things. And he was so amazingly present that, I could sense how amazingly fascinating and wonderful the world was to him. And I think all young children have that. And that's one of the reasons why time goes so slowly when you're a child, because, you have so much new experience and everything is so fascinating and vivid to you. But we definitely lose that as we get older. And I think it's partly social, partly it's due to our culture and the way our children are educated. We're taught to think abstractly. We're taught to study rather than just to explore our environments and to be where we are. But it seems to be a natural psychological process too. I mean, by the age of 16, 17 or 18, everybody has developed an ego. And everybody starts to think a lot in their own mental space. And as a result of that, when we become immersed in our own thought chatter, as I call it, the stream of associations that runs through our minds, then that's one of the main reasons why we find it difficult to be present. But we can try to recapture that through exercises like meditation or by making a conscious effort to be present.
Yeah. Why is it that when we travel, it seems becoming present is much easier?
That's because one of the reasons why we're often not present in a home environment is because they're so familiar to us. We kind of switch off to them because they're so familiar, because we've seen those streets and those buildings and those people, we've seen them dozens or hundreds of times before. So we don't really need to pay attention to them. It's just familiar. So, and that's one of the reasons why time goes so quickly too for most adults, because the familiar experience has a time shortening effect. But when we go to new unfamiliar environments, then it's a bit like becoming a child again. We have a lot of new experience. Everything's unfamiliar. There's a lot of new architecture, new languages, new people, new sights and sound. And all of this new experience, it kind of wakes us up a little bit. And as I say, it's like returning to childhood into this world of fascinating newness. And I think that's one of the reasons why we like to go on vacation so much, because we do recapture that vivid perception. And also there's the time slowing effect as well.
Yeah. It's almost like the vacation puts us in a present state, and what we're enjoying so much is maybe not the environment so much as just the fact that we're present and we're really soaking in so much more of what's around us.
Yeah, definitely. The environment is a kind of trigger just because it provides us with new experience, unfamiliar experience. I mean, if we stayed in that environment, then after a few months, it would become normal and mundane to us. I had this experience when I was 24. I went to live in Germany, and I live at my home is in England. So I went to live in Germany, and it was Eastern Germany, not so long after the communist time. So everything was very different to Western Europe.
Yeah.
And my first 6 months there just was so exhilarating and exciting. I met a girlfriend, and I was trying to learn a different language, lots of new experiences. I was a musician, and that was exciting. So when I came home after 6 months in Germany, I felt like I'd been away for about 6 years. It was so long. But I returned to Germany and lived there. And after 2 or 3 years, it became normal and mundane. So I lost that sense of newness and unfamiliarity.
Is it something that we can only get when we travel, or is it something that we can create in our own hometowns?
It is something that we can cultivate by a little bit in the way I was speaking earlier about conscious attention. There's this phenomenon called mindfulness,
right,
where you make a conscious effort to really be aware of your experience in the present moment. Whatever you're doing, you give your attention to your surroundings, or if you're tasting food, you give your attention to the taste and the smell, and you really savor and experience the food. And that, when you cultivate that conscious attention, that also has the effect of de-automatizing your perception. You step beyond familiarity and the world becomes new again. And again, that's like stepping back into a world of childhood.
Yeah. So I'm just feeling, even, from this conversation, I'm feeling a lot more present. I feel like it's like, because we're talking about it, I'm really looking around and seeing just a lot more mindful. For someone who, is really still trying to grasp this concept here, what does it mean to be like enlightened or spiritually awakened? Is it an experience that happens, or is it something that you develop over time? How do you know if you are enlightened?
Well, some people have it naturally. Maybe a small number of people have it naturally. And presence is a characteristic of it. And also vivid perception, people who are awakened. And there's quite a large continuum. So, it's not just a question of being awakened or not being awakened. There's lots of, ground in the middle. So there's a whole continuum of different intensities of wakefulness. So, as I say, vivid perception, a sense of beauty, a sense of wonder, and also a sense of connection. People who are awakened, they feel quite connected, or very connected to other people. They feel a lot of empathy and compassion for other people. They also feel connected to nature, maybe even connected to the whole universe in some kind of a general way. And they also have a kind of an inner stability. So often in life, we're very affected by situations around us. We're very affected by bad news or good news. And we're very affected by other people's opinions of us or other people's attitudes towards us. But in wakefulness, there's a more stable sense of self where people are not so affected. Even if bad things happen, they still remain fairly contented. Even if people oppress them or ridicule them, they retain their basic contentment. So they're not so affected by external events. And also, maybe one more thing I can mention is that they tend not to be too interested in accumulating wealth or possessions. They're more interested in sort of giving something back to the world rather than being concerned with what they can take from the world or what they can get. They're more concerned with what they can give to the world.
Wow. And do you feel that this is the direction that, let's just say, society is moving in, or are we moving away from that?
Well, it's tricky. If you look at the present situation in the world, in Europe or America, then there seems to have been a bit of a reversion towards nationalism, towards materialism, towards egotism. But I think if you take the wider picture and look back over the last maybe 2 or 3 centuries, there's definitely been a growing trend towards connection and compassion. If you or I step back in history 300 years, maybe to Europe 300 years ago, we'd be completely amazed at the cruelty, the brutality of life, the brutality towards children, towards animals, the low status of women, and the terrible treatment of different ethnic groups. But now there's quite a lot more compassion that has developed over the past 2 or 3 centuries, and there's a lot more connection to nature. A lot more people feel this desire to embrace nature, to have some kind of contact with nature. And probably over the last few decades, there's been this amazing upsurge in interest in self-development and spiritual traditions and spiritual practices. So I think all of these, you could see them as signs that we are moving slowly towards wakefulness.
And is there any, I agree with in the last decade or so, there seems to be a lot more thought around self-development. I mean, you could just tell by the industry just growing. I know one of the points you have here, which I was given, was how can you tell the difference between someone who is fraudulently teaching spirituality versus someone who is genuinely awakened and wanting to serve and help others?
Yeah, that's tricky because, spiritual teachers are not regulated at all. So anybody can set themselves up as a spiritual teacher. They can get their own website and their own Facebook page and start to proclaim themselves as enlightened beings and start to collect followers. So you need a bit of discernment. You need to be able to judge the deluded or the exploitative teachers from the genuine ones. And one of the things I've done, which I've included in my book, The Leap, is I've created an inventory of spiritual awakening based on about 100 cases of spiritual awakening. So me and my co-researcher, we analyzed all the reports of awakened individuals to highlight the basic characteristics of wakefulness. So we established about 10 or 12 different characteristics. And the idea of the inventory is that if an awakened person or somebody who claims to be awakened doesn't possess all of these characteristics, then they're probably not a genuine spiritual teacher. And one of the most important characteristics is a lack of desire for power or hierarchy, because some spiritual teachers, they set themselves up in a very elevated position, and there's a real sense of hierarchy. They keep themselves distant from their followers, and their followers are very subservient to them. And I think that's a really bad sign. That's probably a sign that somebody isn't awakened, because one of the primary characteristics of wakefulness is a sense of egalitarianism, a sense of respect from other people, and also a sense of humility. So if somebody does not have that sense of humility, if they try to set themselves up as a rarefied, separate being, then they're probably not awakened.
I think it's important to know. I mean, you said it. It's very easy for someone to set something up and self-proclaim, and then they may have good or not the best of intentions for the people they serve. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And on this journey of being awakened, what would you say are some of the most common mistakes, like do's and don'ts, that people make when they try this or are actively doing this?
Well, one of the biggest myths about spiritual awakening is that it's a state of complete bliss and complete ease. A lot of people think that they attain some degree of spiritual awakening and they immediately become blissful beings whose problems dissolve away, and they become free from all anxieties, all challenges, and nothing in life affects them anymore. But that's, and often people become disappointed. They think, oh, well, maybe I'm not really awakened after all, because I still occasionally get challenged, or I still occasionally have problems to deal with. But, life is never completely free of difficulties. And most awakened individuals continue to be affected by negative events, maybe not to the same degree, but they still continue to be challenged to some degree by life. And the challenges are actually useful, because challenge always enables us to deepen ourselves, to stretch ourselves, to expand ourselves. So, we should really welcome challenges and difficulties when they arise. And I think another myth is that awakening is an endpoint. A lot of people think that if you attain spiritual awakening, then that's it. You've got to the end of the road and there's really nothing else to do. You become free of samsara, as they call it in Buddhism, and you've reached nirvana. And, you can celebrate because you've reached the end of the journey. But in actual fact, awakening is a whole process in itself. It's not really the end of the road. It's kind of a shift to a different road, but the road continues. It unfolds with different challenges and different adventures, and we continue to deepen and to expand ourselves.
So it's not nirvana, but more able to live a fuller life and able to handle challenges and crises better.
Yeah, I mean, the challenges and crises still exist, but we can welcome them. We can look at them as opportunities for development. And every challenge, even every trauma or tragedy, has a potentially positive underside to it. There's always a little kernel of potential for transformation in any negative experience. So we need to find that kernel and harness the potential for positive development.
Yeah. So being awakened does not mean that you have a problem-free life.
No, it certainly means that your life becomes easier, and it means that you become more free of problems and difficulties, but not completely free. Maybe at the most rarefied, the most intense levels of awakening, problems may disappear altogether. And the other thing is that a lot of people undergo a sudden shift into awakening in the midst of intense psychological turmoil. Like, for example, people who are diagnosed with cancer, people who suffer from bereavement, or people who seem to lose everything due to addiction or alcoholism. And they often undergo this sudden shift into a different state of being. But it doesn't mean that they become completely new people. In many ways, they do become new people, but some personality traits continue. You still hold on to your basic personality traits. And it can take a long time for negative personality traits to fade away. So that could be a source of potential difficulty too.
Yeah. Is being awakened lonelier, since typically the masses are not on that same page?
No. When people undergo sudden awakening, it can sometimes cause difficulties in their relationships because the people around them, they don't really understand them anymore.
Yeah.
They've changed and the people around them have remained the same. So there's a gulf that's opened up between the people around them. I found this recently. I did a study of a person who'd been a heroin addict, a Scottish guy, and he spent several years as an addict, and he'd reached the point where he was on the verge of dying. He'd sort of lost everything, and he was in such terrible health. But he explained that one morning he woke up, and he had no idea why, but he suddenly sensed that something was different inside him, that he didn't want to take drugs anymore. He felt this kind of core of stability or stillness inside him, which he'd never experienced before. And he suddenly realized that, he was a different person. The need to take drugs suddenly left him for no apparent reason. But one of the problems that he found was that when he tried to explain this to his family and his friends, they had no idea what he was talking about. They thought he'd gone a bit crazy or he had some kind of breakdown. But he felt suddenly, as if he was a new person. So he said that it was quite lonely for a while because the people around him had no idea of what to make of his new personality. But slowly he gravitated to people who did understand. He went to see a meditation teacher, went to see a Buddhist teacher, talked to his Christian local minister. And so slowly he found a kind of framework to make sense of his situation. But it can be lonely initially. But on the other hand, when you undergo this shift, in a sense, you don't really feel lonely in the way that you did before because you feel so connected to other people or to the world around you, to nature, that you don't have that sense of being isolated. Loneliness is about being isolated and feeling kind of trapped inside yourself.
Right.
But when you feel connected, then you lose that sense of being trapped inside yourself. So in a sense, you don't get lonely to the same degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I think that clears that up. There is this, I feel like the mainstream thinking may view spirituality as like kind of a minimalistic lifestyle where it's not about money, it's not about trying to keep up with the Jones. It's like very simple, and I'm wondering if people listening are somewhat cautious or afraid that if they become awakened or more spiritual, that it would move them away from the things that they do value, such as money and income and some of these external items that maybe they do value, such as a car or a big home, etc.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. In a sense, that's true. I mean, as I said before, when people become more spiritual or more awakened, then there is a shift in values, and people do tend to become less focused on accumulating things or gaining things,
right,
and more focused on contributing things or giving things to the world.
And so, do you think? I'm wondering, like, do you know of maybe this would change the way how people view spirituality? But are there very successful individuals that you know of who are spiritually awakened that maybe most people just don't know about? Like, I can think of some hip hop artists who, like Russell. I forget their all of their names, but I know there are very successful people who swear by meditation, who swear by a practice of spirituality, but they're just not too public about it.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, one of the things which changes is that, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to lose everything or give everything away and live in complete poverty.
Yeah, right.
It just means that in a sense, you value what you have more, and because you value what you have, then you don't really need so much. So you kind of lose the impulse to accumulate things just because what's around you right now seems to be enough, and you really appreciate what you have. But I think it's true that there are a lot of kind of anonymous or unknown spiritually awakened people. I mean, that was what I found when I started to do my research. I found that most of the people I spoke to who'd undergone this shift into this more expansive and authentic state of being, they didn't know anything about spirituality or religion. They were just completely ordinary people in the midst of everyday life doing fairly normal jobs. And, they would never call themselves spiritual. Some of them didn't even know about meditation. They were so far away from spiritual practices in their background. So my feeling has always been that there are thousands of spiritually awakened people around us all the time. And we just don't know about it because, sometimes they talk about it. Sometimes they want to spread their wisdom and help other people. But sometimes, they keep it to themselves and, they don't tend to broadcast it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of, talk about that. So for someone who's listening is like, oh, like this feels like you've heard of people saying like woo woo, or that, this isn't for me. It's, they think it's going to take away from them. And I just want to, to get your comments on that. And because I really think that this is something that would add to their life and help them enjoy more of what they do have while creating, and going after their goals and such.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think your attitude to money changes in the sense that sometimes people still value money, but more in the sense of how it can help other people, or how it can buy them time. I mean, people begin to really value time rather than busyness or work. They really value time to be themselves, just to do nothing or to follow their interests.
Yeah.
And there was a shift in values, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they totally forsake the impulse to make money, but maybe their motives change in the way that they want to use their money.
Yeah. Shifting from self to contribution. I like that. That's going to, we've had a powerful interview here. I want to dive into the knowledge round. Just want to ask you a few more rapid fire questions before we wrap up here. So, Steve, are you ready for the knowledge round?
I am.
All right. And first question I have for you, Steve, is what advice would you give to someone who's feeling really lost or unsure of their purpose?
I would say, don't think consciously about your purpose. Just turn away from it for the time being. Focus your mind on other things. And then slowly your purpose will begin to arise inside you.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
I think in kind of Western culture, American or European cultures, there's a lot of emphasis on men to be busy and to be productive and to be ambitious and to achieve a lot.
Right.
And I think that's stopping men from tuning into themselves more deeply. I think it's stopping us from embracing quietness and simplicity so that we can find ourselves really, truly, and really go deep into our own inner being.
And so what you think is holding most men back is this constant feeling to do and build and create when we could just take a step back and see what's really coming up for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to be creative and to build and to do, but it needs to be based on a foundation of kind of being primarily. Being needs to come first before doing. And there's so much emphasis, so much pressure on men to be busy and active and productive that sometimes it doesn't allow us a chance to be and to find out who we really are. And once you find out who you really are, then your creativity and your actions will arise from a place of greater depth, and your actions will become more pure and more authentic.
Yeah. It sounds like to me, we want to make sure that the ladder is leaned up against the right wall before we climb it versus just endlessly climbing for the sake of climbing.
Exactly. Yeah. You need to find out who you really are, what you really need to do.
Yeah.
And you need to have quietness and simplicity to do that. And otherwise, your activity is coming from a shallow or an inauthentic place.
Yeah, that's great. And so your book here, that, most recent book, The Leap, The Psychology of Spiritual Awakening, just for the audience, you can get that on Amazon. But for yourself, Steve, what have been 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey, and why?
One of them was the poems of Walt Whitman, an American poet called Walt Whitman, a 19th century poet who was based in Brooklyn and New York. And Walt Whitman is somebody who finds amazing exhilaration, amazing wisdom in mundane everyday life. So he has this ability to kind of illuminate all of the actions of everyday life and find the spiritual wisdom and the meaning of everyday actions. And the second one is a book called the Upanishad. It's an Indian spiritual text, which was written maybe 2,500 years ago. But like a lot of sacred spiritual texts, even though it was written so long ago, it seems quite modern. It seems timeless. And the wisdom of that book can really inspire me in my day-to-day life and remind me of what's important in everyday life. Lastly, one of my favorite books is called Practicing the Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And Eckhart Tolle obviously is famous for writing The Power of Now, but in Practicing the Power of Now, he gives us lots of very straightforward and simple exercises in how to live in the moment and how to embrace the present.
Yeah, great. In The Leap, he wrote the foreword to your book.
He did, yeah. He very kindly wrote the foreword.
That's great. That's great. Have you ever been with him in person?
Yeah, I've met him a few times. Yeah, over the years, I've become quite friendly with him.
Is he the most spiritual guy you've ever met, or is he just a calm guy, or what was your interaction or kind of takeaway from being with him physically?
Well, I was very impressed because he's pretty famous now. Yeah, and he's very, very successful. Yeah. But he has no sense of being special about him. Like some celebrities have a real sense of, bit of egotism and self-centeredness about them. But he had none of that at all. He was very, very generous and very humble. And also, as you say, very, very calm. He has a bit of an aura around him, so that if you spend time with him, you become very calm yourself. And it's very pleasant to spend time in his company.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Good to hear. And now this next one is more of a scenario for you, Steve. So imagine you had 60 seconds with 25-year-old Steve, if you can envision where he's at personally, professionally, in his relationships. Knowing what you now know today, what would you tell 25-year-old Steve to do and not to do?
Wow. I would tell him not to worry. I would tell him to follow his intuitions and to keep going on the path he was on at that time. Because at that time, I wanted to be a writer. Yeah. And I spent a lot of time writing, but I had a lot of uncertainty and quite a lot of failure. So I was very skeptical about what I was doing, very doubtful. So I'd tell him just to trust his intuitions and everything would work out. And tell him not to do, I would tell him to start to live more authentically and try to find a life in alignment with his true self. Because at that time I was a musician and used to drink a lot and smoke a lot. And I was quite depressed because I was living kind of out of sync with my true self. Yeah. So that's what I'd tell him.
And yeah, I like the advice there. I'm wondering now, even if you have to summarize some of your main points here, Steve, what would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
My philosophy is that one part of it is that human beings are much deeper and stronger than we realize. We sometimes live quite superficially, particularly when our lives are easy and we're living in familiar environments, doing familiar things. We tend to live on the surface and we don't realize how much potential and how much strength is inside us. So often when we're challenged, we're kind of doubtful that we can deal with the challenge, but we almost always find that we can, because we have these resources inside us. So, and that's one of the things I've realized from researching people who've gone through terrible situations, but they've almost always come through and found that they are deeper and stronger than they realized. So I'd say that to everybody, you have these amazing resources of strength and potential and competence and power inside you, which you don't, which you're not always aware of.
Yeah, really good. And that's going to conclude the knowledge round there, Steve. And so I'm curious, what's exciting you now today? What's getting you out of bed in the morning?
At the moment, it's my kids, because I've got 3 young kids, and the oldest one is 13, the youngest one's 7. And they're such sort of vibrant and vivid guys that I just love to hang out with them. We play football, we play soccer a lot, we go to the park and we play games. And there's such an amazing sense of positivity and amazing energy, amazing vitality just through hanging out with my kids.
What would you say have been some of your kind of biggest lessons about having? Are they all boys, or they have girls too?
3 boys.
3 boys. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say of what have you learned from having the 3 boys? And it looks like across different age groups.
Yeah. One thing I've learned is that you can always be present. I used to sort of be a college teacher, and I was quite busy and quite stressed out. And I'd sometimes come home sort of a bit frazzled and wanting to rest. But I'd start sort of playing with my kids, and immediately this natural positivity would fill me. And I realized it was because I was forgetting everything about my job, everything about my life. And I was just plunging straight into these games and giving myself completely to the present moment. So it taught me the value of being present and the importance of just turning away from mental activity and giving your full attention to the present moment. And also it taught me a lot about integration too, because my kids, we live in quite a multi-ethnic area where lots of different social groups, ethnic groups, but they all go together to the same school. And my kids, they have no concept of different cultures, different ethnicities. They just accept everybody for who they are. They have no concept of difference. And that's quite interesting, because adults sometimes do have concepts, and they sometimes have, different attitudes to people of different races or ethnicities. So it's great to realize that naturally children don't have that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Really, really, really cool to see what kids can teach you and being a father. So thank you for sharing. And Steve, so your book here, The Leap, for the audience, go to Amazon, The Leap, Steve Taylor. And is there any other websites or anything you'd like to share for the audience to check out and learn more about your work?
Yeah, well, my website is www.stephenmtaylor.com. That's Stephen with a V, M for Mark, stephenmtaylor.com. So there's lots of my essays and poems and articles and information about all my books.
All right, guys, stephenmtaylor.com. You can learn more about Steve and the work that he has. This has been a fantastic episode. Thank you so much for your time, sharing your wisdom and answering these challenging questions here for my audience.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.